demons are coming! Oh look, the demons are here. All of you, the horrible monsters of the underworld, come to make me do news for an eternity. Welcome to this, the news. Speaking of news, it's breaking. I have the freshest broken news for all you filthy monsters. So get ready, because I'm serving it up hot. For our first news, apparently, humans have brains. Wait, that can't be right. Well, the news says, so I guess it's true. According to the Demon Special Forces on Earth, assisted by unwitting humans, we have concluded that, indeed, there are brains inside of these usually stupid and ignorant beings. The following program will be dedicated to detailing the various sections of the brain and what they do. Why? Because we're in hell. I'm in hell, and so are you. Let's do hell together. I mean the news. To begin, we will start with the lowest part of the brain, the spinal cord. The spinal cord is what connects the brain to the rest of the body, sending information into and out of the brain. It travels down along the spine, allowing the brain to make someone eat, or walk, or breathe. And if it's damaged, everything below that point will be paralyzed, or the person will die. Now for the medulla, or the medulla oblongata as it's more commonly known, the lower part of the brainstem. Its function is a bit complicated, so I'll try to explain it pretty easily for you. It controls something called the automatic nervous system, which in turn controls the things that you don't tend to think about, like your pulse and your breathing pattern, and when it's time to use the restroom. Moving up to the pons, the highway of your brain. It has many jobs, most of which are involved with transporting information. It also plays an interesting role in sleep. So yeah. Next up, we have the cerebellum, the next major portion of the brain. It sticks out at the back like the butt of the brain. It controls muscle movements, posture, and balance, all in the butt of the brain. Moving up, we have the amygdala, the emotional part of the brain. It's a small nut deep inside there, regulating your fear, and is a part of the limbic system. Fun fact, if you lose it, you actually won't feel fear. You might hold a spider or a snake or be held at gunpoint and not be scared of any of those things. On to the hippocampus. It's on the lower part of the limbic system. Its job is to encode long-term memories so that you will never say that embarrassing thing again. You know what I'm talking about. You know, that thing that we all know happened? I'm sure you're not lying about it. Ah! That looks pretty strange, huh? Speaking of strange, it's called the pituitary gland, and it does a lot of things. The most broad one is secrete hormones. These hormones can often cause things called hormone cascades, which is fancy talk for hormones activating hormones in the endocrine system. Your pituitary gland knows when to start secreting hormones because the hypothalamus tells it to. Also by secreting hormones. The hypothalamus is also in complete control of that automatic nervous system we were talking about earlier, making it control most of your body temperature, hunger, thirst, sleep, and even sexual response. Must mean that my hypothalamus isn't working. Speaking of hormones, where do they come from? The answer, surprisingly, isn't your genitalia. Hormones, specifically of the neurotransmitter variety, are produced here in the reticular formation. Also, most of your dopamine comes here, so mine must also not be working. Now for the thalamus. It basically serves as a connector to the cortex, which is the main brain part of your brain. It also helps with pain sensation, attention, alertness, and memory. We have one more brain part to go before we go to the weather, and it's the corpus callosum. It connects the two halves of your brain so that they can communicate. Oddly enough, if you were to remove the corpus callosum, you can actually start fighting yourself. You know, because both halves start acting like individual brains. And like an old married couple, they actually hate each other, even though they've been together most of your life. And now it's time for the weather with Jim Jordanson. Thanks, Jim. We have a serious problem on our hands here in Hell. Our plans to take back the realm from the humans has been going pretty well. However, the legendary Doomslayer has arisen from his ancient slumber and is starting to decimate through the demonic forces. If it's a matter of time until he reaches the BFG, And by that, we mean only a few hours. And if he does that, that means that we're all gonna die, because the BFG is an unstoppable weapon of doom. That's your weather break. Back to you in the studio, Jim. Thanks, Jim. We're going to continue our deep dive into the brains of humans, because I have no choice. Instead of talking about individual parts of the brain, I'm going to talk about different areas. Not parts! Areas. No, there is a difference. Look, I told you there is a difference between parts and areas. Oh, come on, look. The brainstem is at the very base of the brain, primarily serving as a medium of communication for the brain and the rest of the body. It controls instinctual and automatic systems in the body. It consists of the pons, the medulla, and the reticular formation, and leads into the top of the spinal cord, as seen here. The cerebrum, which is the outer layer of the brain, has many parts in it. Those parts are called lobes, and we're going to go over all of those lobes. The first one is a temporal lobe. It's kind of right there in the middle, where all your deepest and darkest secrets are kept, because it is responsible for memory, hearing, and sequencing and organization. Moving on, the perennial lobe is just above the temporal lobe, right around here. It's kind of like a radio receiver, because it interprets things like vision, motor, sensory, and memory signals. A very strange lobe is the occipital lobe. It's strange because it interprets sight at the back of the brain. And your eyes are in the front. My theory for this is that our eyes are actually not real, and everything that you see is being projected to you through the back of your skull by aliens. And the last lobe is the frontal lobe. It is responsible for all of the higher level thinking skills that you see in front of me. The frontal lobe is also underdeveloped in children and young adults, which tends to be why they have harder times paying attention or being socially apt. Speaking is a very common thing for humans to do, so there are several parts of the brains that are specialized, like the Wernicke's area and the Broca's area. Wernicke's area is very important to the output of language. If it is damaged, one will not be able to speak as well as before, or even at all. They should still be able to read and understand language, however. Broca's area is very similar to Wernicke's, but it's reversed. Though Wernicke's was responsible for spoken language, Broca's area is responsible for understanding it. If it is damaged, one won't be able to understand speech nearly as well, or at all. The sensory cortex is a strip on the top of your brain that is responsible for the first steps of sensory input. For example, it does not completely process an image, but it can process the outlines of objects and their motion. These are the most basic things that one would need to survive, so it makes sense that it's a separate function. If this is damaged, you will lose some of your ability to use certain senses. The motor cortex is a strip right next to the sensory cortex. It's primarily responsible for your voluntary movement. It does all the heavy calculations for what you do. If it is damaged on your left brain, you will have movement impaired on the right side of your body, and vice versa. The last cortex is the cerebral cortex. It is comprised of the entire outer layer of the brain. That means it has a lot of functions, like these here. And depending on what is damaged, you will lose some of those abilities. The last area is the limbic system. The limbic system is in the middle of your brain. Most species with any amount of brain will have some form of the limbic system. But in humans, it is what drives instinct and thoughtless action. It also controls basic emotions, like fear and happy and angry. If it's damaged, these things will not happen as strongly or won't even work at all. This is the end of the broadcast. I hope you all have a day. Now excuse me while I go to the bathroom before the next broadcast, because remember, I can never leave.